Is the Stormlight Archive a great series? Absolutely. 100%. It's an amazing series. But does it have its flaws? Yes. Yes, it does. And I'm here to tell you about what my biggest disappointment with this series so far is. Hello, welcome to the Ponderings of Pete. My name is Pete. If you're new here, I talk about fantasy, I talk about sci-fi, I talk about some nonfiction stuff sometimes. But I talk about books because I just like talking about books. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like. If you want to see more, go ahead and hit subscribe and hit that bell notification so YouTube can notify you when I post things. This is going to be a spoiler talk. I'm going to be talking about the Stormlight Archive up through Rhythm of War, Book 4, which at this point in time is the only 4 that are out. Also the 2 novellas, but I'm not really going to talk about them right now. This video would not be here without a certain post and a certain person. His first name is Udi. His last name, I believe, is Kumra. I don't know if we're pronouncing it like that. I kind of got that from Reddit and random other Discord stuff. But he posted a Reddit essay and then linked it into Discord. And then him and I talked a little bit after I read it about his kind of disappointments with Oathbringer and Rhythm of War. This essay is down below. Go ahead and read it. It's not that big of a read. It's a little bit of an essay for Reddit, but this ain't no thesis. It's a short 2-page essay. Essentially, he was talking about how he wished that the formation of the Knights Radiance was more of a focus in the books. Because from Oathbringer to Rhythm of War, you have Oathbringer where you have we have 6 Radiants. Yeah, it's fine. And we need to get more. And that's where Oathbringer leaves off. Rhythm of War comes, and we basically have an army of Radiants. We got an army now. They just trickled in. Yeah. What Udi's essay was kind of talking about how he wished we had more time looking at the formation of those orders rather than those individual orders and the struggles that Kaladin, the struggles that Shallan went through in forming those orders. And he went as far as to say that it could have been done very well, very easily in Oathbringer. I think Shallan's story should have been altered. I was not satisfied with where it was in Oathbringer and Rhythm of War. Her story, and there's 1 or 2 other main characters that kind of intersect with her story that I wish everything could have been handled differently. Udi kind of talking with this essay kind of sparked something in my mind. I was like, oh, all the pieces starting to fall into place. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is how I kind of wish it was. So from talking with him and then reading his essay, it's just oh wow, I know what I wish it had been. So I'm going to lay out what I thought was disappointing to me in Oathbringer Rhythm of War, and additionally what I think it could have been. I realized that this is of no use whatsoever. It's just kind of I wish it was this way. But the past is the past and the books are the books. I also recognize that the inherent flaw of me telling what Brandon saying, you know what, Brando Sando, you should have done this. The inherent flaw of that is I don't know the plans for the entire series. I'm going to make a lot of statements that are in this next couple minutes about, hey, you should have done this. You should have pushed this back or done this earlier. I don't know the entire plan of the Cosmere, so I don't know what he's planning for the next 6 books. I may look back on this in a few years and be like, you know what, maybe this could have been different. I see why he did this. But first and foremost, I love this series. I think I said it in the intro, but I really do love this series, and I'm gonna follow this till the day I die. I plan on collecting all the leather bounds. I love this series, and that is why I can say this, and that is why I am able to analyze this series to the depth that I desire to analyze this series to the depth that I have. So, what is my greatest disappointment in Stormlight Archive? I loved Way of Kings and Words of Radiance. Oathbringer Rhythm of War, I guess I'm really less in love with them now after thinking about a lot of them. Because I feel like they could have been better. They were great books. And I'm still one of the people that says Dalinar's flashbacks are the best flashbacks of the entire series. Because Dalinar is amazing. However, after Words of Radiance, it started with Adolin killing Sadeas, and specifically afterwards, and then Shallan's story in Oathbringer and Rhythm of War that I was unsatisfied with. I was disappointed as a result of Adolin's killing of Sadeas. First, that's a common contention point for fans, is that it wasn't handled adequately. It felt like a lot of the death was brushed off, that the investigation was brushed off, and the confrontation between Adolin and Dalinar was brushed off. I saw this as an opportunity with Shallan for Shallan to grow more because of this death as well. Specifically in relation to Iali, Sadeas's widow. Iali is really the biggest disappointment, but I will get to her later on. We'll talk about Shallan. So Shallan's story so far, in Words of Radiance, Shallan is realizing what her powers can do. Shallan is realizing that she can be a spy. She's forming Veil at this point in time. Developing the personality, even though she doesn't know what she's doing. And her mind is being weird and splitting, and the DID is kind of developing at this point in time in Words of Radiance. Then in Oathbringer, I feel like she takes a hard left. About halfway through Oathbringer, it kind of like, instead of being about her becoming a spy and building a spy organization, it's just like, oh, we're just going to take this sidestep to the cognitive realm. Okay. And all of her arc regarding the organization she's forming, regarding to her skills as a spy, is just like, out there. It's gone. Doesn't matter anymore. Even when we get to the Battle of Thaylen Field, it's all about her. It's not about the organization she's forming. It's not about her leadership skills whatsoever. And then we don't see that arc again until Rhythm of War. And I think her time in the city in Kholinar was supposed to be about her kind of using her organization, her newfound skills and her newfound organization for like, yay, spy stuff. But I felt like it was very lacking. She ended up getting caught up in being like, I got a child killed. And the incompetence of her was shown, but the incompetence of her organization was kind of just brushed off. Everybody was just automatically competent. So there was conflict with Shallan herself, but there was no organizational conflict. So it was just assumed that the organization worked the way it is supposed to, which is never how organizations work, ever. Conflict will arise. People won't do their jobs. People will do more of their jobs. Like, nothing runs smoothly, especially when you have no idea what you're doing, aka Shallan. Rhythm of War comes around. We start to see more of our organization. It's called the Unseen Court, which is such a cool name. Like, seriously, that's kind of reminds me of like fairy things and like the fairy courts, but it's still a ridiculously cool name. I really dig it. Then we get the murder mystery. Iali's dead, and Shallan is just continuously introspective. Shallan retreats within herself. She doesn't use her organization. She doesn't act like a leader of an organization whatsoever. Like, she's just like, oh, you guys know what to do, and oh, you can come, but I'm not actually going to make a decision. And the side quest into the cognitive realm, again, was unsatisfying because it feels like Sanderson was telling us a lot about how Shallan's organization had grown, but he didn't show us anything. And he was putting Shallan in her organizational place where we couldn't see anything. We couldn't see her do her thing. Even though we've been told the Lightweavers are such amazing spies. I don't see any of that. Even with the Ghostblood stuff, we see a little bit of the Ghostblood stuff, but it's more just like the Ghostblood's tangling a bit of bait in front of her the entire time. It doesn't feel like Shallan is actually going tit for tat with the Ghostbloods. It doesn't feel like it's actually like a spy versus spy thing. We get a tiny bit. But Mraize isn't really a proper foil for Shallan because Mraize and his goals not only are unknown, but they are not anti whatever Shallan's goals are. They're not. The true antagonist that was my disappointment was Iali. Iali had so much potential. So much. But Sanderson chose not to use it. I think a cohesive storyline between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War could have been had that involved Iali and served as a foil to her, to grow her organization, and to showcase Shallan's incompetence and her growing through that, and her organization's incompetence, and then them growing through that. Her being killed off at the beginning of Rhythm of War was one of the biggest tragedies of the series. Because, first off, her character had been built up, like I said. In Words of Radiance specifically, we get 2 or 3 different quotes where it's like, Iali's got a network. She's got a network of assassins. She's super smart. But we never, we see a few conversations with Sadeas, but we never actually see anything. We don't see the effects of her organization. We see her being petty in Oathbringer, but in Oathbringer, she's like, not there. She's like, I'm going to be rebellious against you, Dalna. Haha. I didn't carry my own chair in. Oh, I'm going to have Amaram investigate. And then nothing happened. Like, Amaram started investigating, and then we don't see Amaram until Yasna shows up, I'm pretty sure. Just like there's so much going on that Amaram and the investigation is all just brushed aside. When then there's so much room for conflict there. My main issue is that she was built up and then nothing was done with her. And there could have been so much done with her. What do I think could have happened? What could he have written? What should he have written? I mean, well, more could have than should have, because I don't know this entire scope of the series yet. So I think Way of Kings through Word of Radiance. Don't change it. It's fine. You have a nice setup for Ialai in Words of Radiance. Sadeas dies. That opens up the role for Ialai to jump in and be like, my man died. Who did it? Beginning of Oathbringer. Ialai, still vocal about her husband's murder. Amaram, still investigating the murder. Specifically, Amaram interviews Adolin as a gesture of collaboration and a sharing of resources. Of course, Dalinar and Adolin are like, we ain't gonna give you much. But this interview sparks something with Amaram. It sparks a suspicion because he asks certain questions and Adolin gets uncomfortable and Amaram sees this. Because Amaram is a smart man. He did not get where he is now, or he was then in Oathbringer, without being smart. So he's perceptive. He sees things, and they spark a suspicion. Shallan. She starts out the book discovering, like, after Ialai is all huffy, Adolin confides in her a little bit, and Shallan's like, okay. And then somehow she, by chance basically, probably pattern, she discovers that one of Adolin's servants is a spy for Ialai. And at one point, she tracks and follows the servant, to a meeting. And at this meeting, the servant meets with two people who go two different ways. Shallan, regretfully, is only able to follow one of them, which didn't lead to much. He just went out drinking. But that other person she thinks might have actually gone to meet with Ialai, and she could have heard some more stuff that could have been very incriminating for Ialai. But regretfully, she was only able to follow one, which sparks a thought in her head of, what if I had other operatives? So now, she's inducted into the Ghostbloods. That stays the same. She's inducted, she refuses, all that jazz. Most of the first part or two of Oathbringer, before they go off on the mission, is mostly unchanged, outside of those things. So she meets Ishna. She recruits Ishna. She starts using her guards from from Words of Radiance. She starts training them. And at the end, before she goes off to Kholinar, before that point in the book, normally, one of them, preferably Ishna, bonds with a cryptic. Not cryptid. Nobody bonds with the Bigfoot. But one of them bonded with a cryptic. That would be so cool. So she starts building an organization. We see the origins of the unseen court. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Yasna comes back. She's back. She's back, baby. Yasna tries to put Shallan under her wing as a ward again. Shallan is pushing back because Shallan now has an organization she's trying to build. In fact, at one point in time, Yasna specifically requests Shallan's presence for something, whether it's to spend time with her or to teach her something, when Shallan is supposed to be spending time with her organization. And she has to stand up. She either has to comply or refuse. During this time, Veil and Radiance start coming forth and becoming different, distinct spreads of her personality, like distinct personalities. But once we hit Yasna coming back, once we hit that mission to Kholinar, that's when everything splits. That's when this book goes completely different. Could have gone a completely different way, in my opinion. Instead of going to Kholinar, Shallan stays to further develop her organization and to combat Ialai. And this is after the Midnight Mother has been dealt with. Most of the stuff that happened there is the same in those first few parts. So after Yasna arrives, after maybe Kaladin goes off to Kholinar with a bunch of Windrunners that he's trying to train, this is where we have a divergence. This is where we begin to see the basis of the new Knights Radiant. Now, all this time, the Unseen Court, the feints with Ialai, if there are any in this first part, it's all been hidden from Adolin. She doesn't tell him anything. Adolin hasn't told her about the murder either. After the mission to Kholinar split, more spy hijinks. That's kind of what I got here. This is where the real spy versus spy happens. This is where Beryl would be discovered, because she was discovered between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War. This would be where one of the Unseen Court should be killed. Perfect time to start recognizing some consequences for your actions. They're following, they do a poor job, somebody dies. Either before, but maybe after as well, somebody bonds with a cryptic, and Shallan realizes that she's just different, and she has to realize that everybody does light weaving differently. In Rhythm of War, we're kind of just told that, oh, hey, all these different Lightweavers learn differently. All these different Lightweavers, whereas this would be an opportunity to actually show that everybody does it differently. Not everybody sketches. Some people just naturally do it. Some people are different at blood. Some people are different at metal. Some people are bad at faces. And this is a setup for the battle. At this point, Amaram comes to his conclusion. Well, I mean, something's going on with Shallan, but Amaram comes to a conclusion of it has to be Adolin. And he tells Ialai, but probably either in an interlude or just off screen, Ialai is like, you know what, don't make a public spectacle out of this because this is blackmail material. Just wait, we'll tell them. Amaram then confronts Adolin, and he's like, you did it had to be you. Adolin admits nothing, Amaram's convinced. Amaram then drops a hint to Dalinar that Adolin must have done it, and Dalinar's like, what? And then Dalinar confronts Adolin. And this is where Adolin kind of just like, I'm not sure if Adolin admits to it to his father or doesn't admit to it, but they come off and they split. They're mad at each other. They don't want to talk to each other. And this is right before the Battle of Thaylen Fields. So they go into the battle knowing that they have to battle, but they're still mad at each other. So there's some conflict there. At this point, also with Shallan and her organization, she's dealing with her DID. She's seeing the full manifestation of Veil and Radiant. And other people are noticing. Sanderson does an excellent job with some mental illnesses or mental issues that, showing what it's like to deal with them. But I feel with DID, he kind of dropped the ball a little bit in Oathbringer, and I feel like I wish he had done more in Oathbringer with it. Specifically dealing, and I don't think he even did this in Rhythm of War, dealing with people's perception of it. Because between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War, he kind of brushed over people figuring it out, and like the whole entire Unseen Court figuring out that, oh, she's kind of a little bonkers, like, our is our leader crazy? So I think that was a missed opportunity to deal with just people being people. Some being intensely supportive, some people being kind of like weirded out. Some people being supported in the wrong ways. That could have been done in Oathbringer, I think, but it wasn't. Now, in the battle, Shallan, originally in Oathbringer, manifested Veil and Radiant, and when she manifested them, she had issues with her identity. I would leave this somewhat the same, but also have her realizing that the Lightweavers need to work together because everybody's different in different things. So yeah, you'd have 2 to 3 Lightweavers helping, probably about 2 Lightweavers helping her create the illusions because she can't do it on her own, even though she's amazing. After the battle, another similar scene would happen. Adolin and Shallan would have a heart-to-heart. Instead of being about a random three love triangle, it would be more about not only Adolin being able to tell which one is the real Shallan, but also a heart-to-heart about the things they've been hiding from each other. Adolin hiding the murder of Sadeas, and Shallan hiding the Unseen Court and hiding all the spy stuff she's been going on and the true purpose of it. They're like, hi, Ialai is a huge threat, and Adolin being like, so that's why Amaram, I bet you Ialai knows, but we're not entirely sure. Also, what I would have happen is Dalinar and Adolin have heart-to-heart. So at this point, Dalinar decides he's going to release his entire, hi, this is what I did, to the world. And instead of Adolin finding it out from the book, Dalinar would be like, look, before I write this book, I need to tell you this. I killed your mother. And Adolin being like, yeah, I killed Sadeas. I don't necessarily know how that would end. I think Adolin would still be a little bit mad at Dalinar, but less so, less rebelliously petty to a certain extent that he was in Rhythm of War. He seemed like it to a little bit before it was brushed over. It would be a moment of resolution. And this would be right before the wedding, or right after the wedding. But we would still get a wedding scene, because we need a wedding scene. Brandon Sanderson, can you give us like a real quick short story that's just the wedding, please? We ask it politely. Can we get a wedding scene? Ialai crashes the wedding, maybe? Who knows? Rhythm of War. How would I have that change? I'm not really going to talk about this time skip much, but I will say that I don't want Ialai to die immediately. I don't want there to be this Ialai murder mystery, because I think it was only so-so. What I would have happen is Ialai's character, after seeing Amaram defect to Odium, Ialai would have a huge shift. And I don't know if it would be before or after Amaram's defection. Ialai would essentially become convinced that Dalinar's Knights are false Radiants, and that the original Knights Radiants were actually Singers. And that Honor was actually trying to invade Roshar. And Odium was the original sponsor of the Knights Radiants. So that the Knights Radiants of Honor are not actually the real ones. So she's fully flipped. Psychotic, off a rocker. It's been a few years. In the first 2 parts of Rhythm of War, what I would have happen, and I believe this is roughly in the middle of part 2 is when Irithyru is invaded. I would have Irithyru invaded at the end of part 2, and you'll see why. But the first 2 parts would be Adolin and Shallan dismantling Iolai's forces. There would be the scene from the beginning, minus the Iolai appearing in the death scene. I would say that's a good series of scenes to have, minus Iolai dying. While they are dismantling Iolai's network. They would get rumors of this great plan that Iolai has, but they wouldn't be able to know what it was. And there'd be conflicting information, which leads to the part, kind of like the conclusion of part 2, where Dalinar concludes that the actual plan is going to take place on the front, I believe is in Emul, where he takes the army against the Skybreakers, and Taravangian eventually betrays him. Dalinar firmly believes that was the plot that Iolai was setting up. Conversely, Adolin and Shallan disagree, and they think it's going to happen near Ethereal. So they stay behind as Dalinar goes there. And at the end of part 2, we have a grand moment where it's not that the singers just randomly got in a hole in the bottom and killed some people to get in. Iolai literally opens the door for them in some way, shape, or form. But Iolai makes the way for them to come into Irithyru and take over. And she insists on ruling with Raboniel. So we have Die Hard. Kaladin is the only one left awake because he's the one that's closest to his 4th ideal and he's getting real close. Adolin, Shallan are captured, and Navani. Iolai wants to kill those 3. Adolin, Shallan, and Navani. Raboniel has to defend Navani, and Navani uses Shallan and Adolin as bargaining chips. So Navani will not work unless Adolin and Shallan are kept alive. Raboniel needs Navani to work and direct, and just science geek moment. So Raboniel and Navani get their science geekiness together. Kaladin manages to rescue Adolin and Shallan and wake up Shallan in some way, shape, or manner, but without her surge binding. So she cannot do her illumination stuff. So she has to learn to be a sort of a spy, but without her powers. Vale learns some crazy Assassin's Creed stuff and has to kill some people, and Shallan is conflicted about that. So Vale's going old school. What would end up happening in the end is Shallan kills Iali. And this is where Formless comes into play, because the thing I would want to stay similar, is Formless. Formless starts rising up in the beginning, and at the end, when Shallan goes to kill Iali, she's like, no, Vale, I have to do it. And then Formless comes up, and she has to destroy Formless and be like, no, I'm doing this because you're me and you're all the horrible things I've done. I'm going to kill Iali. So Shallan kills Iali and destroys Formless. The big gap kind of in this Rhythm of War kind of wish list is Testament. I couldn't think of a way of putting Maya's story and Testament's story in there to indicate that Pattern is not her first friend. That would have to be pushed off to a later book, as well as a lot of the discoveries of the cognitive realm, because I didn't really talk about that. Maybe Kaladin goes through it, but for the most part, no, I would push that off to something else, and I would lengthen other parts in order to get just divorce the cognitive realm sections. It was a side quest that revealed things, but it was too much for what it was. I wish that there would have been a more cohesive story in Rhythm of War. I just felt like there were too many disparate pieces. So yeah, that's my thoughts. That's what I think I wish I could have happened in Rhythm of War and Oathbringer. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. But please be respectful in the comments down below, because that's really important. Just not to be internet douchebags. We all love this series. Well, most of us love this series probably. But don't be a douchebag and don't respond to douchebags. Please speak with kindness and compassion. But whatever your opinions about what I just said, I would be happy to hear them. Remember, get some rest, everybody, because that's really important, and have a good night.